Hi, Julie. Welcome to the Leaders Lab.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Yeah, I've been doing some research on you, and we wanted you on the show for some specific reasons. I think you've been very open. I think it's part of what's made you successful with, both the good and the challenging stuff in your life, and how that's led to opportunities and things in your career. Can you walk the audience and me through wherever you want to start? Really, I mean, literally where you grew up, when you got married, and what happened next.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. So I grew up in a pretty conservative Christian environment. So I got married really young and I had three children pretty fast. I was married by 21. My husband at the time was 19. And our path was pretty laid out according to a conservative kind of Christian traditional model. And I don't remember much about my 20s except that I was nursing and pregnant for a lot of it and felt really overwhelmed, a little dissatisfied just because I was really smart, I had done well in school, but I never had a chance to have a career or anything. So, in my 30s, sort of waking up from that haze, and my kids were really closely put together, so like they all kind of went off to school. There was this moment of like, okay, what am I going to do now?
Hmm.
And and so I took to the internet. I started blogging just as sort of a way to kind of, I don't know, get my thoughts out on paper. I started to get paid to write just like SEO articles and stuff like this. And I thought, maybe I'll be a writer. And that was around 2011. And it worked, but it was very low paying, at
Sure.
at least where I was looking. And I didn't really need to make a ton of money. My husband was the primary breadwinner. I was just making enough for Disney vacations and groceries. And so it wasn't until a couple of years later when I had a massive personal life crisis within my marriage. It was just a lot happening to us. And it was about 2014 when we filed for divorce, and it was a big scandal. And like we were the good kids who got married young. It was it was a reckoning. I lost a lot of friends. I lost my church community and my marriage. And I had made the very, very poor choice, I'm just going to be really honest,
Sure.
of downloading an app called Tinder that my friends in the blogging world were like, you gotta try this app. Now, this app was brand new. There weren't really dating apps in when I was like, I know
So,
now we know them all, but like at the time, Tinder was like brand new. So
sure.
I downloaded Tinder, and the first person that I like swiped right on, I ended up in this sort of like whirlwind, very toxic, but I really wasn't very aware of how toxic it was because I had been with my Christian husband since I was 15 years old. So I was
Sure.
like kind of naive. Uh, and I ended up in a very sort of dangerous situation that led me to getting pregnant. And I was, um, I'm a Christian, even though I had walked away from the church and all that. I just felt like there was a reason that that had happened, and so I was navigating divorce. I was navigating a new pregnancy. The person I was with was not a U.S. citizen and was about to leave the country unless I married him and kept him here in the United States. I had no money. It was just a train wreck.
Sure.
And that was the environment in which I began my business, which is kind of crazy. Um, and so there was just an enormous amount of pressure on me to perform, to produce money, to have a home that I could get my kids. I had waived my right to alimony. I'd waived my right to child support. I just was like, by the grit of with my teeth, I was gonna like figure this out. And so that was the environment that I built my web design and marketing agency under. And I went from making 25 grand a year to making like 125 grand a year with this sort of pressure on me.
How quickly?
Uh, I would say 2016 was the year. I actually made more. I made $325,000 in 2016, but my income was 125. So
Sure.
2016 was like that pivotal year, and I had gotten divorced in 2014.
Why did you? Because I've seen other people do this, and it usually more women, at least that I've met, than men that are like, I'm going to waive my rights. I'm, to all the monetary stuff. Is it for you? Was that just, I just want it to be over. I want to move on. Is that kind of where that came from?
It was naivete. We didn't
Yeah.
have the money to hire a lawyer. And because we had been separated, I was so ashamed that I was
Hmm.
pregnant. There was a feeling of like, I don't deserve any of
Got it.
this. I didn't really know I was entitled to it. I also didn't want to put that financial burden on my husband because in my head, I was like, if I take all his money, like, how is he going to continue to support the kids? So, what I said to him was like, I'm not going to ask for anything. I just need you to support the kids while I try to figure out how to build a career. And so that was my mindset. And we wrote our divorce agreement. I'll never forget the judge. I was in the courtroom pregnant as can be. I had my ex-husband on one side and then I had my boyfriend on the other because we all had to swear under oath the paternity of the baby. Otherwise, he wouldn't have granted the divorce, which I needed in order to marry the other man so he would stay in the United States and be there for the birth of my child. So you can see
Wow.
like the difficulty I was in. And I
Wow.
remember him like taking his glasses off, being like, who wrote this divorce agreement? And I was like, I did. He's like, it reads like a blog post. I said, well, that would make sense because I'm a blogger. He's like, I really should not okay this. This is not like, but I convinced him that my ex and I would be amicable and it would be fine. And there was no alimony or child support. It was just all 50-50. So he granted it. And 7 weeks later, I was at the courthouse marrying the father of the baby so that he could stay in the United States for the baby's birth.
Wow.
It's
And
like Jerry Springer.
yeah, but with a good outcome, right? Usually the Jerry Springer ones don't have such a good
Well,
outcome, but
yes and no.
sure. What happened
Yeah,
to the
I mean, it
guy that
was,
you married? Did he stick around in this? I mean, because you're talking about him in past tense, so I assume you guys aren't
yeah.
together. And yeah, what happened there? What happened next?
Yeah, so William was born in June of 2015, and he is the best ending of this entire story. Like that little boy is just the delight of my life. And so I am so grateful for everything. And I think that the kind of the crisis really did propel me to get gritty. And I have, my podcast is called Million Dollar Grit because it
Yeah,
was in crisis that I really learned how to get rid of the stuff that doesn't matter and focus on what does. But the relationship that I was in was incredibly toxic. And I didn't want to fail again. I didn't want to prove everybody right. I didn't want to have a second failed marriage, even though it was kind of a shotgun wedding in a courthouse to keep him in the country. And so I stuck with that relationship for 8 years. Um, and it would have been much healthier for my children and for me had I broken it off sooner. But it's just that sunk cost fallacy. Like I don't want to be a failure twice. And
right.
it kept me hanging on. The other thing that happened is that my income was going up drastically quickly. I was getting a lot of notoriety. And so every year I would consult a lawyer to like see, can I do this? And they would just tell me like you're going to get screwed. You're going to get screwed because I had no prenup. I had nothing in place. And so I was just terrified of the financial loss. So I stuck with it for 8 years before I finally said my mental health is not worth like it's worth all of my riches. And so I filed for divorce in 2022.
And the financial burden only got greater, I'm sure, as it's not like you were going backward ever, right?
No, and I wish so badly. It's a huge regret that someone would have said to me like this is the cheapest it's ever going to be because
Exactly.
by the
Yeah.
time I filed for divorce, I took a financial hit that's like very, very difficult to swallow.
Yeah, I can see. Still, it's like, but
Yeah.
you keep going the way you're going, and then it'll look much smaller in 5 or 10 years, probably. I'm sure.
That's the idea.
So it was funny because if you look at your LinkedIn profile, it tracks like 2003 to I think 2013 was like you're a music teacher,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Then I see a couple of short gigs. Those were probably your writing gigs,
Mhm.
right? And then everything kind of takes off, like you're saying, in 2016. So tell me about the business side. How did you start and how did you get the momentum that you got to get to where you are now?
Yeah. So I started in done for you work because I could just charge more. I didn't need a huge audience. I could get $5,000 a client. So I did writing, which then led to web design because I was in WordPress a lot as a blogger. So I did WordPress, web design. And then I jumped over to funnels once I discovered the internet marketing world. I ran into Russell Brunson and I was like, wow, I could charge like 3 or 4 thousand for a new website, or I can charge like 10,000 for a funnel. So I
Right.
jumped into that world. It was the same skill set and I was really good at it. So I had a few banner clients who made $1 million. I got kind of a name for myself. And then I thought, okay, like help me math this out here. I'm charging you 10K, you're making 1 million. Why don't I build a funnel for myself? So I did that at the beginning of 2017 or 2016, 2017. I built a funnel for myself, teaching people how to build funnels, basically just teaching what I knew how to do. And that funnel got me to $1 million, and that really put me on the map. And I, at that point, bought my way into like Russell's inner circle, and he immediately saw my potential and scooped me up and hired me. So I was running my $1 million business, and I was also working for ClickFunnels, which was giving me even more visibility, and the transfer of trust. So I was just growing, growing, growing. And I left ClickFunnels in 2019, just a misalignment of values. And I started a software company alongside of my partner at the time, and that's taken off. And so everything feels kind of like an accident, but I think the key to what made me continue to grow was I just always woke up and said, what are the problems I can solve today? Like there are so many problems in the world. What problems can I solve and who can I solve them for? And I didn't really get tied up in like, oh, is it going to be a membership? Or oh, is it going to be a course? Or oh, is it what like I didn't get like sucked into the shiny object. I just stayed really problem focused. And then people were always willing to buy their way out of problems. And I would just be like, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
And that's how I grew so fast.
Just finding needs and filling it basically. Did you
Exactly.
know? I mean, so you spent all of your 20s, early 30s, it sounds like, doing part-time stuff, teaching music, working at home
Mhm.
or being at home, raising
Mhm.
kids. And then it seems like almost immediately your entrepreneurial instincts were pretty strong. Did that surprise you, or did you know that you had that and it was kind of repressed? Because in a lot of ways, even though you went through a lot of pain, that first divorce at least was kind of a gift, at least in terms of launching your career, right? I mean, because had that not happened, I'm guessing you probably would have stayed at home, right, and continued raising the kids.
Yeah, I don't know that I knew that I was entrepreneurial. I knew that I was always excited about making money, even as a teenager. Like I was teaching piano since I was 14, 15 years old. I got a job. I remember, going and getting my resume, and I wanted to work at the toy store. And so I pitched myself and I got a job. So I always had like strong ambition, but I came from a pretty like lower middle class family, lots of debt. There's no one in my family that's made the kind of money that I made. So I was very surprised as this money came in, just like, is this for real right now? Like
Right.
I couldn't believe it. Even though I was, I think, pretty entrepreneurial minded, or at least just like I was ambitious. I like always wanted a challenge.
Right. And I mean, there's such a big difference. There's a couple of levels, I think. One was going from, making 100K and being like, okay, this is great. I know I can feed the kids and put a roof over their heads. And then there's kind of that 300K mark where it's like, we can do a little more than that, right? We can take some cool vacations and stuff like that. And then there's this next level, and it's almost like your identity has to catch up to the income where you're at, and it sounds like, has your growth ever slowed down? It seems like it's been, because if I look back for you, you've done a ton in what, I don't know if it feels like a short amount of time or not. For me, it seems like a short amount of time. It's like basically 8 years that you've been in business, right?
Yeah. So the growth at the beginning, because I went from 300K to 1 million to 2 million, I was just like,
Yeah.
and those years, probably from 2016 to 2020, were just insane. It has stabled out a lot. in the last 2 years, especially because I just don't have this same boogeyman chasing me that
Right.
creates that level of intensity, which is probably good for my adrenal glands, to be quite honest,
Sure.
because I don't know that it was super healthy or balanced. So right now I have two companies. I have a private consultancy, which is, where I do one-on-one coaching, and then I have Funnel Gorgeous, which is software and education. And so that company has consistently done 4 million a year for the past 3 years. And then my private consultancy does about 1 million. And I really haven't pushed it to go bigger because I know the mental cost of it. And I'm
Sure.
really quite happy with my lifestyle. I mean, I had a lot of savings goals. I wanted to save for college. I don't have a 401k. I lost it in the divorce. There's just like all this stuff that like I'm trying to do. I've done a lot of it. I know that I'm not yet quite at the point that I can retire. At least not with the current bills I have now, because I have a
Yeah.
lot of
Sure.
bills.
New bills.
Yeah, new bills. But I have more saved and invested now than I ever dreamed I possibly could. And I think I've just decided, you know what? I'm just going to keep serving people, but not at the cost of my health.
No, that's very I think that's very smart to reflect on that, because I think so many people get caught in the trap, especially when you're capable. It's like, well, I could take it here. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, why though? like
But
like
why?
what are you
Exactly.
what are you gonna get? What does life look like if your software company goes from 4 to 10 million? I mean, if it enriches your life, then great. If it's just adding to the bank account, or you're just doing it because it's the next best thing, and you see it, I'm sure, all the time in your work. In fact, I was telling you right before we started the show, I was watching this video that you made about a year ago. And I mean, I'm just going to jog your memory on it, but it was on your YouTube channel. And you were talking about the, mental health sacrifices that people make and you're an influencer in what you do. That's kind of, I feel like, how you built your brands, really. Not, I mean, obviously your technical expertise and all of that, but it's a big part of what you do. And certainly in the ClickFunnels world and all of that. How you seem like, I mean, just here today, but also everything I've seen from you online, you seem like somebody that has found a way to be really authentic, be honest about who you are, where you are in life. And it seems like you've struck a healthy balance, but it doesn't seem like that world is full of people that have. And I think that's really what your video was about. Um,
Yeah.
you see so many people that are, I don't know the guy, but let's just because it's topical. The other night was the Jake Paul, Mike
Yeah.
Tyson fight.
Yeah.
That to me seems like a guy, Jake Paul. Mike Tyson's already had a few rude awakenings, but Jake Paul to me seems like a guy that's going to have kind of a rude awakening one day. I don't know him. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But this idea of chasing success and not being authentic to who you are, can you talk about that a little bit, and what the cost is that you see from people, and maybe
Yeah.
how do you establish your brand and be, I guess, authentic, or at least true to your own values, and be in
Yeah.
integrity?
It's so I find just from a pure like math perspective, there are points of equilibrium in a company and then there's points of like disequilibrium. So I always tell people if you are at $300,000 a year, that's kind of the ceiling where you can get away with just like being a one-man show.
Sure.
If you're going to jump, if you want to keep going, you have to understand that that means now hiring and a different type of infrastructure. And you want to go for the next point of equilibrium, which is 1 million. You don't want to stay in the five to $700, 700,000 range, because what's going to happen is your expenses are going to go up, which is going to make your profit go down, which is going to stress you out. And so there seems to be these equilibrium points at threes and tens. So 300,000, 1 million, 3 million, and 10 million. And so if you're going to leave it, go for the next one, but evaluate why. I would much rather have a $1 million business that pays me 700,000 year, $700,000 a year or 600,000 than I would a $10 million business that pays me 600,000. And so part of it is a math equation of like understanding what your income is in relation to your revenue. And I often help people with this because they don't realize what their income would be in relation to their revenue. The
Mm-hmm.
second thing is, what does your actual desired lifestyle cost? Because if I sit people down, I'm like, what is it that you really want? They don't actually need a $50 million business to get there. They
Right.
need $1 million business to get there. And so once they have that awakening, it's like the goal is to equal, kind of equalize at that mark. And so that's all like the math stuff. But I think I don't know. I think sometimes rude awakenings are a gift because it forces you to evaluate what your values are and what's important to you. And so I've had multiple rude awakenings in my divorces. I've had children who've become teenagers who have gone through eating disorders and drugs and just all that stuff. And I've had issues of haters and people backstabbing, betrayal, blackmail. And and so at the end of the day, I have to live with myself. And so if I'm going to be an influencer, I've got to be the most honest version of myself I can because some point when you're an influencer, someone's going to come for you. And
Sure.
so the more masked you are, the more trouble that you're going to have in the long run.
Well, and I think that's also what leads to, and I'm copying you a little bit, but I just happen to agree with what you were talking about is that lack of authenticity. You know it every time you're out there. It's like you're lying to yourself. This isn't who you are.
Yeah.
I interviewed somebody not too long ago. That it was our episode that just came out about a week ago, where he grew up in an extremely religious environment, and then he, not through his parents, but just on his own accord, when he's very young, like 12 years old, 13 years old, took a deep dive and became pretty fanatical in his religion and didn't know, but later on discovered his sexuality, and he was gay, and he's in this church that's like very Puritan. This is over in London. And all of a sudden, everything, you can't sleep, you can't eat, you can't, you know what I mean, like everything clashes. He never felt at home, even though different groups welcomed him for his skill set and all of that. He never felt connected to anybody, including his own family, because he was never even honest with himself about who he was, right? And so,
Yeah.
yeah, you see that happen so much. Tell me, what about becoming a leader? It's one thing to have entrepreneurial instincts. I think the next level of that, and going back to your math equation, it's probably that $300,000 jump to the $1 million jump. You have to learn how to become a leader. Was that natural for you, or was that something that you had to kind of go through the school of hard knocks on?
Yeah. I think I learned a lot about leadership in my church. And I think I learned a lot about leadership raising children.
Sure.
And I learned a lot about leadership teaching piano, which sounds silly because it's sometimes it's easier to lead small children than it is adults, but leaders lead from the back, right? It's like the wolf pack. They're in the back. And I think that's directly in competition with the influencer energy, which is main character
Yeah.
energy. And I didn't come online to become a main character. I came more from the lead from the back, the day in and day out of caring for children who were not going to thank me, not give me a like or a thumbs up, and certainly not give me a paycheck.
Sure.
And so I learned I had a lot of that character building happening behind the scenes for almost a decade, maybe even more before I came onto the scene. So I had to actually learn more the influencer performative stuff than I did the leadership stuff. And I'm really proud of the fact that I have a lot of clients who stick with me for years. I have a lot of team members that stick with me for a long time. And one of the biggest things I can say about being a good leader is about being open to hearing feedback. And even if you don't agree, just an open door of communication where people can respond, can not be afraid to tell you how they feel, and being comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because if you think about it in terms of how can I help them get to their potential, you're going to
Mm-hmm.
be a good leader versus how can I, fill my own bank account and fill my own needs. It's just a fundamentally different approach.
Totally. And I think it comes back to your authenticity. I mean, being able to admit when we make mistakes, being able to, because by doing that, we get permission and create an environment like, where other people can do the same, where you are more approachable. And I'm guessing the way you are talking to me right now is not a lot different than how you would talk to anybody on your staff, right? It just is what it is.
Pretty
We're all
much.
here, and I strive for the same thing. And so I'm guessing it's funny because I said you don't have much leadership experience. She said, well, wait a minute, I've got 3 kids, I taught music, I did all of this, but who knew? Like if you see that on a resume, you're not necessarily going, okay,
Not
that's going to
impressed. I know.
well, you're just going, that's not necessarily going to translate into building, a couple of businesses that are worth 5 million bucks or not worth more than that, but that generate
Yeah.
revenue of 5 million bucks within just a few short years. Right. So, but I think it's that combination of things that you did with, whether it's natural, wherever that was brought into your personality, that natural authenticity that allows people to be themselves. And I think that includes honest feedback when it's not good too, right? It's just clear
Well,
talk.
one other thing that I think was an unintended skill I learned from teaching piano, teaching 6-year-olds how to play music, how to play the piano with right hand, left hand, notes, alphabet forwards and backwards. It takes an incredible amount of skill to be able to break down the concepts so that a 6-year-old can learn them. And so I got really, really good at simplifying complicated ideas for small children. That skill has served me so well because whether I'm explaining something to a student or I'm trying to communicate to a team member, your ability to break down whatever's going on in your head, that complicated, that cursive genius that we often have, and then create and then say it in a way that inspires action
Yeah.
from the person is also a really valuable skill. I don't know if I'd call that a leadership skill or a teacher skill, but that has served me very well.
I think it's a leadership skill because it's a communication skill. And like when you just started going to that answer, I was thinking of being like your client and you having to explain to a guy that's never used funnels how this whole thing's going to work. Right. And
Right.
it's like, listen, Mr. Business Owner, CEO, or whatever you are, it's not as complicated. It looks complicated if you're
Right.
looking at all the flow charts and everything, but here's what we're going to do, right? We're dumping stuff in at the top, it's going through here and it comes out here. And
Yeah.
not that it's that simple. But so how do people work with you now, Julie? You said they work both one-on-one and also leverage your software.
Yeah.
So talk to me about that. And I know that you focus your coaching a little bit more on female entrepreneurs too, correct? Or you
I
did?
mean, that's how the cookie crumbles. But I
Yeah,
have about 30% of my clientele are men, and then the other 70% are women. Obviously, I have a more feminine edge on the Funnel Gorgeous brand. We were trying to bring that more feminine design into the internet marketing world, which was predominantly male. And we say to people, we're not for female entrepreneurs, we're for anyone who has a female customer.
sure.
Because that's important. So Funnel Gorgeous is more my courses and software, so people can work with me through the products that I produce. It's not one to one. My private consultancy is a one-to-one container. So I work with all kinds of online business owners, helping them grow and scale with offer creation, positioning, branding, social media, funnels, obviously, is my expertise. And so I work with people through Voxer. I do audits, I do hot seats and those kinds of things. So it's all very private one-on-one coaching. I like to do that. I know a lot of people say, well, why do you do that? It's not scalable. I'm not trying to scale beyond where I
Right.
am now.
Right.
I want to keep my head in the game. And the more clients I work with, the more data I can bring to the community and say, okay, we tried this webinar format, this worked really well, or we tried this challenge idea and this worked really well. And I can bring that wealth of knowledge. It just makes me a better teacher.
That's cool. Two of the most, I feel like, overused, phrases or words. One is it's not scalable because does everything have to be scalable?
No, I know. I
I
don't understand
mean,
why people say it.
sometimes it fills your cup, and
Yeah.
that's the ROI. The other one is people constantly talking about multiple streams of revenue. And don't get me wrong, I'm a fan, but at what cost again? You know what I mean?
Right.
If you're juggling 10 balls at the same time for the sake of financial gain. And sometimes it isn't. I mean, I know people who like to wear their streams of income like a badge of honor. And it's like,
Hmm.
where the profitability and the lifestyle that you're getting from those
Yeah.
streams, instead of all the things you're managing. And I've gotten
Yeah.
caught in that trap myself. What advice would you give going through what you've gone through now, I guess you would have some very specific advice for people maybe in relationships that they need to get out of, so that they can shine. I mean, I think you're just such a good example of that. Yeah, what would you say to that? Because I know we've had some friends where they've hung on for a long time. Let's they know it's my parents did it.
Yeah.
I knew their relationship was over when I was 12. I mean, definitely over by the time I was 12, and they got divorced when I was 18. Let's stay
Yeah.
together for the kids. I was like, it wasn't a great example. We knew what was up. You know what I mean? But what would
Yeah.
advice would you give to someone in that situation?
Well, the advice, I mean, I think the biggest lesson from the relationship that I had that was just really bad was that it doesn't get easier to leave. Like you think it's going to get easier and like you're waiting for that exit ramp. Like it doesn't get easier. It's like you got to push through the fear. It's kind of like when you're having a baby and you're in labor and you know that the pain has to get worse, but the faster you do that, the faster the baby's born and it's over.
Right.
So, resisting that sunk cost fallacy, it's really hard though. If you're in a really toxic relationship, there's an addiction component that needs to
Sure.
be addressed in order to be able to finally break free. Um, but I think the biggest lesson that I'm learning in relationships is that your body actually knows better than your brain sometimes. Like if you find yourself nervous around someone or anxious or you can't settle down, you can't sleep, you're gaining weight, there are signs, there are physical signs that your body is under stress, and pay attention to those because it often overrides like our conscious brain, which is actually highly inaccurate many times, and the body is actually pretty dialed in to what is good for you and what isn't.
Yeah, our brains are, we've talked about it a lot on the show, and I've done a lot of personal development and worked as a trainer for like Tony Robbins and stuff like that. And I'm like, our brains are not designed for fulfillment at all.
No.
They are very normally very short-term minded unless we
Yes.
get involved. They're geared to comfort, they're geared to pain avoidance,
Safety.
safety. So it makes sense if we don't leave that space, that it's, well, I can do another day, and a day turns to a week, turns into a month, turns into a year, turns into several
Yes.
years, maybe sometimes, right? And
Yes.
until something in our soul kind of wakes up and goes, not doing this anymore at whatever
Right.
cost it is, right? So, well, thank you so much, Julie. It's been great getting to
Yeah.
know you a little bit. You're really an inspiration, and like I said, I want to short sell your accomplishments by saying it's happened in a short period of time, but it has kind of, I mean, in what you've
Yeah.
accomplished in 8 years is just remarkable. To build two multi-million dollar companies, and to have the impact that you've had is amazing. So thanks for sharing that with us.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
You got it. Take care, and hopefully our paths will cross soon.